Charlotte and I both died in the car crash, returning from our final divorce hearing. As the metal twisted around us, her last words cut deeper than any physical pain. If I could do it over again, I would never have left you for Alexander. This life with him, it's become my worst nightmare. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in our kitchen on the morning she was supposed to tell me about her affair. She was standing there with her resignation letter in hand, about to quit her marketing job to avoid the scandal, but I could see in her eyes. She remembered, too, the desperation, the regret, the knowledge of how her dream romance with her charming coworker had destroyed everything she actually valued. But this time, I wasn't going to fight for her. This time, I knew exactly how her story would end. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from and if this story touches you. Make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I stood frozen in our Willowbrook kitchen, watching Charlotte fumble with her resignation letter from Sterling Communications. Her hands trembled not from nervousness about confessing her affair, but from the weight of memories that shouldn't exist yet. "James," she began, her voice carrying that same defeated tone I remembered from our previous life. "I need to tell you something about Alexander and me." But this time, I wasn't the naive husband who would beg her to reconsider, who would fight for our 8-year marriage while she emotionally checked out. This time, I knew exactly how her fairy tale would crumble. "You're leaving me for him," I said calmly, pouring myself coffee. The charming creative director with the corner office and expensive suits. She blinked in surprise. In our previous life, I'd been blindsided by her confession. I'd pleaded, argued, even suggested couples therapy. I'd made the mistake of fighting for someone who had already decided I wasn't enough. "How did you?" She stammered, then caught herself. "James, it's not that simple. What Alexander and I have is ... it's magical. He understands my ambitions, my creative vision. He makes me feel alive in ways I'd forgotten were possible." I nodded, sipping my coffee while studying her face. She was 32, beautiful, successful in her own right as a senior marketing strategist. We'd met in college, built a comfortable life together in our suburban home, had talked about starting a family. But comfortable hadn't been enough for Charlotte. "He's promised me a partnership in his new agency," she continued, gaining confidence as she mistook my calm for acceptance. "We're going to revolutionize digital marketing, travel the world, work with international clients. James, this is my chance to become someone extraordinary." In our previous life, I'd pointed out that Alexander was still married, that office romances rarely worked out, that she was throwing away something real for something uncertain. She'd called me small-minded and jealous of her success. This time, I simply said, "When are you moving out?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. She'd prepared for a fight, for tears, for me to make her feel guilty about choosing her dreams over our marriage. "This weekend," she admitted. "Alexander's found us a penthouse in downtown. He's leaving his wife, too. We're both finally free to be together." I remembered the penthouse's sterile glass box that Alexander had leased, not bought. I remembered how excited Charlotte had been about the city views, the modern furniture, the life of sophisticated dinner parties and gallery openings. I also remembered how it had ended. "I'll have the divorce papers drawn up," I said, setting down my mug. "No contest. You can have whatever you want from the house." Charlotte stared at me, clearly unsettled by my reaction. You're not going to fight for us?" "Would it change anything?" I asked, meeting her eyes. "You've already made your choice, Charlotte. You chose it the moment you started staying late at the office. The moment you started coming home talking about how brilliant Alexander was, how he gets you in ways I apparently never could." She flushed, probably remembering all the times I'd tried to engage with her work, all the marketing campaigns I'd pretended to find fascinating, all the late dinners that had grown cold while she texted him. "It's not about you not being enough," she said, though we both knew that was exactly what it was about. "It's about me needing more. Alexander and I, we have this intellectual connection, this creative synergy. We're going to build an empire together." I almost laughed. Alexander Patel was 45, charming, and had been through 2 previous partnerships, both business and personal, that had ended when the novelty wore off. But Charlotte couldn't see that. She saw the expensive watch, the client dinners, the promises of a glamorous life. "I hope you get everything you're looking for," I said, and I meant it, because I knew she would get exactly what she deserved. That evening, Charlotte packed 3 suitcases with her best clothes, her laptop, and the jewelry I'd given her over the years. As she loaded them into her car, she turned back to me. "Last time, James, I want you to know this isn't about you being a bad husband. You're safe, reliable, kind. Any woman would be lucky to have you. It's just not you," I finished. She nodded, looking almost relieved that I understood. "Not me. I need someone who challenges me, who pushes me to be better. Alexander sees my potential." I watched her drive away to begin her new life. I felt none of the heartbreak that had consumed me the first time. Instead, I felt something close to anticipation. Because I knew what Charlotte didn't, yet that chasing dreams built on someone. Elsa's promises usually ended in nightmares. And this time, I wouldn't be there to catch her when she fell, 3 months after Charlotte moved out. Our divorce was finalized at the Grandmont County Courthouse. She arrived wearing a designer dress I didn't recognize, her hair styled in a sleek bob that Alexander had probably suggested. She looked confident, radiant, even like a woman who'd finally found her true path. "You look good," she said, as we waited for our attorney to finish the paperwork. Happy, even. I was happy, though not for the reasons she might have assumed. In our previous life, this day had been agonizing, the official end of everything I'd thought I wanted. This time, it felt like freedom. "How's the agency going?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Her smile faltered just slightly. It's a process. Building something from the ground up takes time, but Alexander has so many connections, so many ideas. We're about to land this huge pharmaceutical account." I nodded politely. In our previous life, that pharmaceutical account had fallen through when the client discovered Alexander's reputation for overpromising and under-delivering. But Charlotte would learn that soon enough. "And the penthouse?" I asked. "It's incredible," she said, brightening again. "The view of the city at night is breathtaking. We're hosting this amazing dinner party next week for potential investors. Alexander knows all these fascinating people, entrepreneurs, venture capitalists." She was trying to paint a picture of sophistication and success, but I could see the small signs of strain. The slightly forced enthusiasm, the way she checked her phone constantly, the expensive clothes that somehow looked like costumes on her. "I'm glad you're happy," I said, and surprisingly I found I meant it. It's not because I wanted her to succeed, but because her happiness was no longer my responsibility. After we signed the papers, Charlotte hesitated by her car. "James, I know this might sound strange, but I sometimes have these weird dreams, like déjà vu, but stronger. Dreams where we're older and I'm miserable." My heart skipped a beat. Dreams can be strange that way. "In the dreams, I come back to you, begging you to take me back. But you won't, and I'm alone, and broke, and Alexander has moved on to someone younger." She laughed nervously. "Crazy, right? What? My subconscious must be processing guilt or something." "Dreams usually mean nothing," I said carefully. "You've made your choice. Focus on your future with Alexander." She nodded, seeming to shake off the moment of vulnerability. "You're right. I'm just being silly," Alexander says. "I overthink things sometimes." As she drove away in her new BMW Elise, I was sure. Meant to project success, they didn't actually. Have I felt a chill despite the warm afternoon? Charlotte was starting to remember fragments of our previous life, meant the timeline was accelerating. That evening, drove through downtown and found myself parked across from their building. The penthouse windows glowed on the 32nd floor, and I could see silhouettes moving around, probably getting ready for one of their networking events. I remembered those parties from our previous life. Them initially, the chance to mingle with important people, to be seen as part of Alexander's sophisticated world. But the reality had been different. She'd stood around making small talk while Alexander worked the room, often ending up in conversations with other men's wives who were just as bored and out of place as she was. the pharmaceutical account would fall through next month, and the tech startup they were counting on would choose a larger agency. Alexander would become increasingly irritable, blaming Charlotte for not bringing in her own contacts, for being too suburban in her approach. By month 6, he'd be staying late at the office not to work, but to cultivate a relationship with their 26-year-old intern, Savannah Moore. Charlotte would ignore the signs at first, just as she'd ignored them with me. She'd convince herself that this was just the price of building an empire, that successful men sometimes had to make difficult choices. The affair would become obvious by month 8. Alexander would leave Charlotte with the lease on the penthouse she couldn't afford, the BMW payments she couldn't make, and the ruins of a business built on his empty promises. She'd come crawling back to our old house, my house, now expecting me to rescue her from her own bad decisions. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But this time, I wouldn't be there. I started the engine and drove home to my quiet house in Willowbrook, where I'd spent the last 3 months rediscovering who I was without Charlotte's constant criticism of my lack of ambition. I'd been promoted to senior project manager at Blackstone Engineering, started reading again, taken up woodworking in the garage for the first time in years. I was genuinely content, and unlike Charlotte's forced happiness, mine wasn't built on someone else's promises. 2 weeks later, I was at the Blue Orchid, a small cafe in Millfield that had become my regular Saturday morning spot, when someone bumped into my table, sending my coffee spilling across my newspaper. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." The voice belonged to a woman with warm brown eyes and dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She was wearing scrubs, a nurse, probably coming off a night shift. "It's okay," I said, grabbing napkins to clean up the mess. "Really, no harm done." "Let me buy you another coffee," she insisted, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "I'm usually not such a klutz, but I just pulled a 12-hour shift at Mercy General and I'm basically a zombie right now." Something about her smile, genuine, unguarded, made me pause. "It's only if you'll join me," I heard myself saying. "You look like you could use the company more than I need the coffee." She hesitated for a moment, then nodded gratefully. "I'm Nora," she said, extending her hand. "James." Her handshake was firm, confident, as she went to order our coffees. Found myself studying her. Nora Ricci. I caught her name when the barista called it out, was probably in her early 30s. With an easy laugh and none of the calculated sophistication that Charlotte had always aspired to, she looked tired but content, like someone who'd found purpose in her work. "Emergency room?" I asked when she returned with our drinks. "Pediatric ICU," she said, settling into the chair across from me. "Tough night?" "We lost a little one around 4 a.m. Her voice caught slightly, and she took a sip of coffee to compose herself. I was struck by her vulnerability, the way she cared about her patients despite the emotional toll. Charlotte had always prided herself on being professionally detached, claiming that emotions were weakness in the business world. "I can't imagine how difficult that must be," I said. "It is, but it's also incredibly rewarding when we save one. When you see a family reunited, a sick kid getting better." She smiled, and it transformed her entire face. "Sorry, you probably don't want to hear about work drama." "Actually, I do. It sounds like meaningful work." She studied my face, as if trying to determine whether I was being polite or genuine. "What do you do? Civil engineering?" "I design bridges and highway systems. Not quite as heroic as saving lives. But I like to think I help people get where they need to go safely." "That's heroic in its own way," she said thoughtfully. "Building things that last, that make life better for thousands of people you'll never meet." Her perspective surprised me. Charlotte had always dismissed my job as boring and predictable, suggesting I should move into private development, where the money was better. But Nora seemed to understand something Charlotte never had, that there was honor in building, something solid and lasting. We talked for 2 hours. I learned that she'd grown up in a blue-collar family in Riverside Heights, worked her way through nursing school, and had been at Mercy General for 6 years. She lived alone in a small apartment near the hospital, spent her free time volunteering at a literacy program, and had never been married. Bad luck with men, she said with a self-deprecating laugh when I asked. I tend to attract guys who are either intimidated by my schedule or who think dating a nurse means having a personal medical consultant. For what it's worth, I said, I think anyone intimidated by a woman with a career probably isn't worth your time anyway. She raised an eyebrow. Speaking from experience, I found myself telling her about Charlotte, about the divorce, about how my ex-wife had needed someone who could match her level of ambition. I was careful not to sound bitter, just honest about how we'd grown apart. Her loss, Nora said simply. Ambition is great, but kindness is rarer. As we prepared to leave, she hesitated. This might be presumptuous, but would you like to get dinner sometime? Somewhere with better lighting, so you can actually see if I spill things before they hit your table? I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. I'd love that. That night, I found myself thinking about the difference between Charlotte's curated perfection and Nora's authentic warmth. Charlotte had always been performing for me, for her colleagues, for social media. She'd measured every interaction against some invisible standard of sophistication. Nora just was. She was funny without trying to be clever, beautiful without trying to be glamorous, successful without needing everyone to know it. Over the next few weeks, we began seeing each other regularly. Coffee after her shifts, dinner at small restaurants she'd discovered, long walks through Willowbrook Park where she'd point out different birds and flowers with the same attention to detail she brought to her patients. You know what I love about you, she said one evening as we sat on a bench watching the sunset? You actually listen when people talk. Most guys are just waiting for their turn to speak. I thought about Charlotte, who had spent our last few years together interrupting me to check her phone or redirect conversations back to her work. With Nora, silence felt comfortable, and conversation felt like discovery rather than performance. Know what I love about you? Said, surprising myself with a confession. You make everything feel real. She smiled and took my hand. That's because it is real, James. This is what it's supposed to feel like. As her fingers intertwined with mine, I realized she was right. This was what I'd been missing, not just with Charlotte, but maybe my entire adult life. The feeling that someone saw me, truly saw me, and chose to be there anyway. For the first time since my rebirth, I stopped thinking about my previous life entirely. The future felt bright enough on its own. 6 months into my relationship with Nora, my life had taken on a rhythm I'd never experienced before, genuine contentment, mixed with quiet excitement about what each day might bring. We'd grown close enough that she'd started staying over some weekends at my house in Willowbrook, and I'd begun keeping a spare set of scrubs at my place for when she got called in for emergency shifts, she said one Saturday morning. As we worked together in my kitchen, her making pancakes while I attempted to brew coffee that met her standards, I never thought I'd be the type of woman who enjoyed domestic bliss. Is that what this is? I asked, watching her flip pancakes. With the same precise confidence she probably used to insert 4 lines. And it's terrifying how much I like it. She grinned at me over her shoulder. I used to think I needed chaos and drama to feel alive, but this... This feels like coming home. Her words reminded me of Charlotte, who had always claimed she needed excitement and unpredictability. I wondered how she was doing with Alexander, though, according to mutual friends. The cracks were already showing. My colleague Marcus Thompson had mentioned seeing them at a client dinner the week before. She looked exhausted, he'd said. Alexander spent most of the evening on his phone, barely acknowledging her when she tried to contribute to the conversation. I pushed thoughts of Charlotte away and focused on Nora, who was now plating pancakes with the artistic flair she brought to everything she did. Speaking of coming home, I said, how would you feel about making this more official? She paused, spatula in hand. Official how? Move in with me. This house is too big for one person anyway, and you're here most weekends already. Her face lit up. James Adams, are you asking me to be your live-in girlfriend? I'm asking you to be my partner. I said, the word carrying more weight than I'd intended. In everything. She set down the spatula and crossed to where I stood by the coffee maker, wrapping her arms around my waist. Yes, she said simply, to all of it. The next month, Nora moved her things into my house, not much, since she'd been living Spartanly. In her apartment hand, we began building something I'd never had with Charlotte, a true partnership. She contributed to mortgage payments despite my protests, insisted on splitting household expenses, and transformed my sterile bachelor space into something warm and welcoming. More importantly, she supported my work in ways Charlotte never had. When I was selected to lead the design team for the new Westmont Bridge project, career-defining opportunity that would span 2 years and establish me as one of the region's premier structural engineers, Nora threw a celebration dinner for my colleagues. To James, she toasted, raising her wine glass as my team gathered around our dining table. Who builds bridges that connect communities and dreams that inspire the rest of us? The project consumed long hours and frequent travel to survey sites, but Nora never complained about the demands on my time. Instead, she'd pack lunches for my field days and stay up late when I needed to talk through complex engineering problems. You're happiest when you're creating something lasting, she observed one evening as I showed her the latest bridge renderings, something that will help people for generations. Charlotte had never understood that aspect of my personality, seen my methodical approach to work as boring, my focus on long-term impact as unambitious. But Nora recognized it as a fundamental part of who I was. Meanwhile, through the professional grapevine, I heard increasingly troubling news about Charlotte's situation. The pharmaceutical account had indeed fallen through, just as I'd remembered. Alexander's startup clients were jumping ship to more established agencies. The lease on their downtown penthouse was proving financially unsustainable. I heard Charlotte's been asking around about freelance opportunities, mentioned Sophia Evans, a former colleague of hers, when we ran into each other at a networking event. Apparently Alexander's been difficult to work with lately. I kept my expression neutral. I hope she finds something that works for her. You're generous, Sophia said, especially considering how she left things. But I suppose you're doing well enough on your own. She was right. The Westmont Bridge project had led to 2 additional municipal contracts, and my reputation in the engineering community was growing. More importantly, my relationship with Nora continued to deepen in ways that surprised me daily. I've been thinking, Nora said one evening, as we walked through downtown Millfield after dinner at our favorite restaurant, about what it means to build a life with someone. And what have you concluded? That it's not about finding someone who completes you that's too much pressure. It's about finding someone who inspires you to complete yourself. I stopped walking and turned to face her. Is that what I do for you? Every day, she said softly. You make me want to be the best version of myself, not because you demand it, but because you believe I already am. Standing there under the streetlights, with this woman who saw the best in everyone she encountered, I realized something profound. I was not just over Charlotte. I was grateful to her. Her leaving had forced me to discover who I really was, and what I actually wanted, and what I wanted was standing right in front of me, smiling like she'd just figured out the same thing. Nora, I said, taking her hands in mine, I think I'm falling in love with you. Think, she teased. No, I corrected. Good, she said, standing on her toes to kiss me, because I fell for you months ago and was just waiting for you to catch up. As we walked home hand in hand, I couldn't help but marvel at the difference between the relationship I'd fought to save and the one that had grown naturally from mutual respect and genuine affection. The Charlotte I'd always felt like I was, auditioning for the role of worthy partner. With Nora, I simply was one. Little did I know that Charlotte's world was about to collapse entirely, and that she would soon remember exactly what she'd given up. 18 months after our divorce, I was coming home from a site inspection for the Westmont Bridge when I found Charlotte sitting on my front porch steps. She looked nothing like the polished woman who had left me for her dream romance. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes wrinkled, and there were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and mounting desperation. "Hello, James," she said, standing as I approached. Her voice carried none of its former confidence. Charlotte. I kept my tone neutral, though my heart was racing. This was the moment I'd been both expecting and dreading, the one where she would realize the full scope of her mistake. "Can we talk?" she asked. "Please. I know I don't have the right to ask." But inside, I said, unlocking the front door. I didn't want the neighbors witnessing whatever breakdown was about to occur. She followed me into the living room, taking in the changes Nora had made, the warm throw pillows, the photographs of us together, the bookshelves filled with both our interests. "You look good," she said quietly. "Happy." "I am happy." She nodded, her composure cracking slightly. "I remember that. From the dreams. You being happy while I—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "God, this is going to sound insane." "Try me." Charlotte took a shaky breath. "I've been having these dreams for months. Dreams where we're older, where I've made terrible mistakes, where I come back to you begging for another chance, and you turn me away." She looked at me with desperate eyes. "They're not dreams, are they, James? Somehow, some way, I remember another life." My blood turned cold. I'd hoped her earlier mention of dreams had been nothing more than subconscious guilt, but clearly her memories of our previous life were becoming stronger. "Charlotte Alexander left me," she continued, the words tumbling out in a rush. 3 weeks ago. For a 26-year-old intern named Savannah Moore, he said I was holding him back, that I'd become clingy and needy when the business started failing, exactly as I'd remembered. Even knowing it was coming, I felt a flicker of sympathy. "For her, the agency collapsed completely," she went on. "All those promises about building an empire together, they were lies. He never intended to make me a real partner. I was just ... convenient. Someone to handle the boring details while he played the visionary." She began pacing my living room, her agitation growing. "I lost everything, James. The penthouse I couldn't afford the lease. The BMW got repossessed. I'm living in a studio apartment in Riverside Heights and working freelance projects just to pay rent." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it. Regardless of how our marriage had ended, I'd never wanted her to suffer. "But that's not the worst part," she continued, her voice breaking. "The worst part is that I remember how good we were together. In that other life and our real life we had something solid, something that lasted. And I threw it away for what? For excitement? For some fantasy about being important?" She stopped pacing and faced me directly. "James, I know this. Sounds crazy, but I think we've been given a second chance. A chance to fix our mistakes. I remember how much I regretted leaving you, how empty my life became without you." The room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock that had belonged to my parents. I studied Charlotte's face, the desperation, the fear, the growing hysteria as she realized I wasn't immediately agreeing to her interpretation of events. "Charlotte," I said carefully, "you're right that you made mistakes, but they weren't mistakes of fate or destiny. They were choices. You chose Alexander over me. You chose the promise of excitement over the reality of partnership. But I know better now," she insisted. "I know what really matters. Please, James, we can start over. We can be happy again." "We can't start over," I said firmly, "because I'm not the same person you left behind. I've moved on. I've built a new life with someone who values what I have to offer." Her face crumpled. "The nurse. I saw her car in your driveway sometimes when I drove by." The admission that she'd been watching my house sent a chill down my spine. "Charlotte, you need to stop. This isn't healthy. She doesn't understand you like I do." Charlotte's voice rose, taking on a manic edge. "She doesn't know about our connection, about what we shared in our other life. What we shared in our other life ended with you realizing you'd made a terrible mistake," I pointed out. "But it ended, Charlotte. Can't undo choices by pretending they were made by someone else." She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact instant when desperation shifted into something darker. "If you won't listen to reason," she said quietly, "maybe I need to remove the obstacles." "What does that mean?" Instead of answering, she pulled out her phone and showed me a photo. Nora leaving Mercy General after her shift, unaware she was being watched. "Pretty little thing," Charlotte said with chilling calm. "Works such dangerous hours too. Walking to her car alone in that dark parking garage. Anything could happen." My blood turned to ice. "Charlotte, if you touch her, I won't have to touch her," she interrupted. "I just need to make sure she understands that some relationships are more important than others. More ... destined." She was completely unhinged, I realized. The combination? A financial ruin, romantic betrayal, and recovered memories from our previous life had pushed her into a psychological break. "You're threatening the woman I love," I said, standing slowly. "The woman I plan to marry." Charlotte's eyes flashed with rage. "You can't marry her. We're connected across lifetimes. We're supposed to be together." "No," I said firmly. "Not in any lifetime." She lunged toward me then, her hands clawing at my shirt. "You don't understand. I can fix this. I can make us both remember properly. All I need to do is recreate the conditions from before the accident that sent us back. I grabbed her wrists, stopping her advance. "Charlotte, listen to yourself. You're talking about causing another accident, about hurting innocent people." "Innocent?" She laughed wildly. "She stole my husband. She stole my second chance." "Didn't steal anything. You gave me up, remember? You chose Alexander over me." For a moment, her face showed a flicker of the woman I'd once loved, confused, lost, and deeply unhappy. But then the madness returned. "If I can't have my second chance," she said with terrifying certainty, "then neither can you." Before I could react, she was running toward the door, leaving me alone in my living room with the horrifying realization that the woman I'd once promised to love and protect had become the greatest threat to everything I now held dear. The moment Charlotte's car disappeared down Maple Street, I was calling Nora's cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. She was probably in surgery or dealing with a patient emergency. I tried the hospital's main line. "Mercy General, how can I help you? I need to speak with Nora Ritchie in the pediatric ICU immediately. This is a family emergency." "I'm sorry, sir, but Nurse Ritchie is currently in a sterile environment and cannot be disturbed unless this is about her safety." I interrupted, my voice sharp with urgency. "Someone is threatening her. I need you to find her now and tell her not to leave the hospital alone." There was a pause. "Sir, I'm going to transfer you to security." While I waited for the transfer, I grabbed my keys and headed for my car. Whether or not hospital security took me seriously, I needed to get to Nora before Charlotte did something irreversible. The drive to Mercy General typically took 20 minutes. I made it in 12, running 2 red lights and probably breaking several speed limits. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles had gone white. My mind raced through every possible scenario of how Charlotte might try to remove obstacles. In our previous life, Charlotte's breakdown had been private, a slow descent into bitterness and regret that had ultimately led to our fatal car accident. But this version of Charlotte, armed with the knowledge of what her choices had cost her, was far more dangerous. She wasn't just grieving the loss of her dreams. She was actively trying to rewrite reality itself. I screeched into the hospital parking garage just as my phone rang. Nora's name flashed on the screen. "James? Security. Said you called about some kind of threat?" "Where are you right now?" "Level 3 of the parking garage. Walking to my car." "What's going on?" "Stop walking. Get back inside the hospital immediately." I was already out of my car, taking the stairs 3 at a time. Charlotte was at the house. She's having some kind of psychological break, and she's threatened you." "Threatened me?" "James, what are you talking about?" I reached level 3 and spotted Nora standing by her Honda Civic, phone pressed to her ear, looking around nervously.
What?
But I also saw something else. Charlotte's silver sedan parked 2 rows away, engine running. "Nora, get away from your car now." Turned toward the sound of my voice, just as Charlotte emerged from behind a concrete pillar. Even from 50 feet away, I could see that my ex-wife was completely unhinged. Her hair was wild, her movements erratic, and she was clutching something in her right hand. "Nora Ritchie," Charlotte called out, her voice echoing through the garage. "The woman who stole my husband and ruined my second chance." "James, who is this?" Nora asked, though I could see the recognition dawning in her eyes. She'd seen photos of Charlotte, heard the story of our divorce. "Stay calm," I told her, moving closer while trying to keep my own voice steady. "Charlotte, this isn't the answer. Nora hasn't done anything wrong." Charlotte laughed, the sound sharp and manic. "Nothing wrong? She's living the life that should have been mine. In our real life, our first life, I've realized my mistake. I came back to you, James. I was ready to make it work." "But you didn't make it work," I said. now close enough to see that Charlotte was holding a tire iron. Even in our previous life, you were miserable. We were both miserable. Because I didn't fight hard enough, she screamed. Because I let pride get in the way instead of making you understand that we belong together. Nora, displaying the calm she'd developed through years of medical emergencies, stepped away from her car and toward the hospital entrance. Ma'am, I think you need help. Let me call someone, don't you dare. Charlotte swung the tire iron. In a wide arc, the metal whistling through the air. This is between me and my husband. Ex-husband, I corrected firmly, positioning myself between Charlotte and Nora. Charlotte, look at yourself. Look at what you've become. Is this really the person you want to be? For a moment, her expression flickered with uncertainty. I remember how much I loved you. How sorry I was for leaving. Doesn't that count for something? Regret doesn't undo choices, I said gently. And real love doesn't threaten innocent people. What you're feeling isn't love, Charlotte, it's desperation. Her face hardened. Again, she has to go. Then you'll see. Then you'll remember how good we were together. Charlotte raised the tire iron and charged toward Nora. I lunged forward, catching her wrist before the weapon could connect. We struggled, and Charlotte was stronger than I'd expected, fueled by the manic energy of someone with nothing left to lose. You don't understand, she gasped as we fought for control of the tire iron. I can fix this. I can make us both remember properly. All I need to do is recreate the accident. The tire iron clattered to the concrete as I managed to twist it from her grip, but Charlotte wasn't finished. She pulled something else from her jacket, Bakita, small bottle of pills. If I can't have our second chance, she said, her voice eerily calm, then I'll just go back to the beginning again. Fine. You, before you meet her, make different choices. Charlotte, no. But she was already dumping the pills into her mouth, swallowing them dry with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd planned this moment. Nora immediately switched into medical mode, rushing forward despite the danger. What did you take? James, call 911 now. I was already dialing as Nora knelt beside Charlotte, who had collapsed against a concrete pillar. This is 911. What's your emergency? Mercy General Hospital parking garage. Level 3. We need an ambulance immediately. Possible overdose. Adult female, conscious but declining. James, Charlotte whispered, grabbing my shirt as Nora checked her pulse and pupils. In the next life, I'll choose better. There is no next life, Charlotte, I said sadly. There's only this one, and you're wasting it. The ambulance arrived within minutes. The advantage of being at a hospital and Charlotte was rushed to the emergency room. The doctors pumped her stomach and stabilized her condition. But the psychological evaluation that followed led to an involuntary commitment to Riverside Psychiatric Hospital. 3 days later, I received a call from Charlotte's sister, Sophie. James, I wanted to thank you for saving her life. How is she? Physically, she'll recover. Mentally, the doctors say she's experiencing what they're calling a severe dissociative episode. She keeps insisting that she's lived multiple lives, that she's trapped in some kind of cycle. Sophie's voice was strained. They think it might have been triggered by the stress of her recent failures combined with guilt over your divorce. I said nothing about the truth of Charlotte's memories. Some things were better left unexplained. She'll be in treatment for at least 6 months, Sophie continued. Probably longer. I know you don't owe her anything, but I wanted you to know that she asked me to tell you she's sorry for everything. After I hung up, Nora found me sitting on our back porch, staring out at the garden we'd planted together. Penny for your thoughts, she said, settling beside me on the swing. Just thinking about choices, I said. How they ripple outward in ways we never expect. Regrets? I considered the question seriously. Did I regret my marriage to Charlotte? The pain of our divorce? The years I'd spent settling for comfortable instead of searching for extraordinary? No, I said finally. Not regrets. I feel sad for her. She was so focused on the life she thought she deserved that she couldn't appreciate the life she actually had. Nora took my hand. People make their own happiness, James. You can't save someone from themselves. 6 months later, Nora and I were Married in a small ceremony at Willowbrook Park, surrounded by friends and family who celebrated not just our union, but the obvious joy we brought to each other's lives. 2 years after that, we bought a larger house in Millfield, close enough to the hospital for Nora's commute, with space for the family we were planning. My bridge design work had led to a partnership opportunity with a prestigious firm, and Nora had been promoted to head nurse of the pediatric ICU. We built a life based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection. Every morning, I woke up grateful not just for what I had, but for who I'd become. The man Charlotte had left behind, safe, reliable, boring, had transformed into someone confident in his own worth. I received one letter from Charlotte during her treatment. It was rambling and often incoherent, but the core message was clear. She was slowly accepting that her memories of our previous life were likely trauma-induced fantasies, and she was working on learning to live with the consequences of her actual choices. "I hope you're happy," she wrote in closing. "I hope she makes you happy in ways I never could. You deserve that. You deserve that." 5 years later, as I watched Nora push our 2-year-old daughter on a swing in the same park where we'd gotten married, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me to this moment. Some people get second chances through mysterious circumstances, rebirth, time travel, divine intervention. But the real second chance is simpler and more profound. It's the choice to stop repeating the same patterns, to learn from pain instead of wallowing in it, to build something new instead of trying to resurrect something dead. Charlotte had been given the same opportunity I had, the knowledge of how her choices would play out. But while I'd used that knowledge to make better decisions, she'd tried to use it to undo decisions entirely. She'd wanted to go backward. I'd chosen to move forward. "Daddy, push me higher." Our daughter called out, her laughter brightened the afternoon sun. "Hold on tight, sweetheart," I called back, giving her swing another gentle push. Nora smiled at me over our daughter's head. "Happy?" she asked. "Completely," I said, and meant it. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting better. Charlotte had chased her dream romance and found her worst nightmare. I'd let her go and discovered my greatest joy. In the end, we both got exactly what we chose. The difference was that I'd chosen wisely. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.